Now, I got something new to go over with you guys, a new service and product that I'll be offering moving forward. It's something we've already done in the past in small quantities to kind of aid some of our other products as a support option. But uh, I found the need that honestly, not a lot of people really provide a lot of the custom hydraulic, pneumatic, oiling, anything related to fuel lines and hoses. So what I went ahead and did is we're actually expanding our catalog on what we offer. Before, primarily, I would do a lot of Fragola, crimp stuff that went along with the transmission conversions, clutch lines. Uh, we did a little bit of AC lines. We're adding power steering lines, but now we're moving into, since we actually have a nice new catalog of new products coming up involving dry sumps for a lot of the full-time race cars. So we went ahead and now we are a direct dealer of Brown and Miller hydraulic fit-in supplies. For those of you not familiar with Brown and Miller, they're more commonly known as BMRS or Brown and Miller Racing Solutions. They are the top tier, in my opinion, when it comes to motorsports in North America uh, for NASCAR, IMSA, sports car racing. They are located out of North Carolina, which is pretty much, for motorsports in North America, you have some of the biggest race teams because of NASCAR and a lot of the NASCAR's teams, such as like Chip Ganassi and Penske. These guys are also housing their IndyCar teams out of there. So Brown and Miller has grown a reputation for being able to provide everything that goes along for a full-time race car. Now, on the import side, a lot of the drag racing, the guys are familiar with them for they make the premier stuff when it comes to plumbing for like dry sump systems, uh, all your oiling systems. It is a little bit pricier, but it's going to be the best of the best. It is all crimp style. It is nothing that is requires any screw together. So that's why I'm pretty much now offering a service where I'll be able to configure your hoses to length using the top tier of the Brown and Miller. Now, that doesn't mean that I won't offer the Fragola. I still offer the sport line as well as the race, right? So those are for a different application. To me, when it comes, especially the larger size, like 12, 16, 20 AN, you're going to be really limited with some of these other companies. Whereas when you go with the Brown and Miller, when it requires those sizes specifically, you're going to get a far superior product. And that actually cascades all the way down the line if you're willing to spend the money on your fuel lines for like 6 AN, 8 AN, 10 AN as well. Now, a few of the things that make up the difference as far as the quality is one, in comparison to just like, for instance, this right here is going to be a Fragola Sport crimp style. This is a regular AN screw together. And this is the Brown and Miller without the sleeve. So what happens is, even just by comparing just the hex, you can notice you're going to save a significant amount of weight on just the fittings, which when it comes, that's why the motorsports guys love this stuff, because you save a lot of weight. And it's not just on the fittings, on a total line, as I'm about to show. Once you finish assembling a unit, the hoses are lighter because the hoses are actually thinner walled but stronger because they're reinforced, and it's a completely different type of material. Whereas most of your other lines for most of the brands, uh, they're going to be thicker walled, which adds to weight, and that's how they get their ability to be reinforced. Now, with the Brown and Miller, especially with what we have right now, the stainless style, which might not be as popular, a lot of guys will see it on the uh, in the black braided, but we went for the stainless steel braided because what happens is their stainless steel braided has the highest rating. It can go all the way up to 28 inches of vacuum without collapsing. So on your really intense uh, race cars that pull a lot of vacuum on a dry sump system, you never have to worry about collapsing. These other lines will be borderline crimping, and the last thing you want to do is lose a significantly expensive motor due to an oil pressure issue after you've already went above and beyond to actually convert your car over to dry sump. So at that point, man, you put a bunch of money in your motor, you might as well plummet with the best. Now, obviously, to me, aesthetically, this looks fine. I don't really like it, but what they do offer is we can actually use their sleeving, which will cover all of this stuff up and make it clean again, and you get the additional fire retardant protection. So that's what we're about to assemble. And throughout this process, I'm going to go through some details, take some measurements, show you some differences, as well as I'm going to show you what we're replacing, and we'll actually be able to weigh them on the scale to see a one-to-one difference. So follow along. Let's get started. All right, so for everyone that's been following along on the channel, I want to thank you and appreciate everything you've done to support us. And for all of those that who haven't already done so, make sure to hit the follow button, subscribe to the channel, and follow us on all the socials. Make sure you stay up to date on all of the newest projects, all the details that we have coming. Appreciate it, and make sure to hit the alert button in case I forgot to tell you that. So now that I've already measured, the first hose I'm replacing, which is 48 inches. What I do is I put this pretty much in the middle of the final measurement. And I'll make a cut here. Now, what you guys are going to notice is this stuff is going to cut a lot easier than most other hoses, fray less, partially because of the quality of the hose. Secondly, because of this thing right here. So we're about to check out this dope little fixture and cut-in device. So the one thing I do like with the handle is it is removable. I can just pull the pin out, take it out. So that way, as I'm doing my day-to-day, I'm not walking around taking myself out with the handle. Makes it really convenient. So it's not as large of an obstruction, even though it does take up a lot of room on the bench. Now, as far as setting this stuff up, very simple, straightforward. The bracket here actually pushes the hose right through the saw. So I'm just going to turn it on and show you how we do it. And for those that are wondering, you can see just how extremely clean this thing cuts. I mean, butter smooth when you really think about it. So it's pricey, but it makes a difference. Final product, final everything. So now that I got it cut, the next thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to apply some more tape to the end. Now, the reason that I'm doing this versus just starting the assembly is on this particular order, since I'm doing the fire sleeve, I add a bunch of extra tape so it keeps it from fraying when I slide it through the sleeve. So then I just pinch it all down, and this just makes it, because the sleeve does expand while you're putting the hose through, but the last thing you need is for the the ends to be grabbing and shearing and pulling and tearing up the sleeve while you're trying to actually do the install. So that's one step I do when we do the sleeve. So now we're gonna go put this in the sleeve. You can see, simple as that. Tape the end, slides right through, braid expands. Now we're actually taking this one step further. This customer is going all the way out. So we decided to do, or what he decided to do, is we're also going to go ahead and use some high grade heat shrink. Now, what I mean by high grade, this is actually above automotive, because your standard heat shrink, what most of the guys might try to get, is based around automotive. We actually opt for a 2-to-1 shrink. that's of the identical quality as like your DR25. So it's geared around even being able to stand up to diesel fuels. Now, why would you use heat shrink? Well, we put these on the ends of the connectors because it pretty much will remove all vapors. So for guys that not only is the hose high quality at sealing with the crimp, but you go one more step. We do this on all of our Teflon combinations for the PTFE style lines, because that combo will pretty much say your race car is actually a street car. Will make sure you can drive around and not, be burdened with smelling fuel and oil and all these excess vapors beyond your gasoline coming out of your tailpipe. You want all that stuff at the back of the car. You don't want it coming through the front, coming through your firewall, making your cabin, uncomfortable. So we're going to go ahead and cut 2 patches of these because we got to put this on obviously before we do anything else. Otherwise, we can't get it on afterwards. Now, the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to swap the die on the crimper, which is as simple as pulling the solid ring up and popping out the other die. For instance, this is a 8 mil die, so this is what I actually use on the clutch lines. And when we're crimping those in PTFE, rest that right here real quick, and we're gonna swap this out for a really, really nice 23 millimeter die. Now, so the 23 mil is what we need to do these particular lines. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these dropped in. These are already oiled. Drop the ring back in, and now the crimper is set up to proceed to its first crimp. Now, the one thing that's nice about this combination is I opted for the electric pump. Now, the electric pump versus your standard pneumatic is very, very consistent, repeatable, which is one of the critical features that BMRS does require to assure quality. Is basically once we adjust the adjustable mic right here for crimp diameter, because this pump, unlike the others, every time it comes down, it doesn't just use an illuminated switch like how it comes standard. The electric pump is actually actuated and it shuts itself off. So once you dial it, you can set it up and crimp, 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 and every single crimp will have the exact same final ring diameter, which is very critical for when it comes to just consistency. So since we're going to be doing primarily a bunch of 12 ANs, 16 ANs, it's like every single crimp, when we go to measure at the end, will be rock solid every single time. So let's go ahead, slide this in here, and get the first one set up. And it's as simple as that. Verify the measurement based on the chart, which this one specifies for 12 AN, should have a crimp minimum of 0.982 millimeters from the original diameter that I measured. So that's one end that's ready to go. So I'll go ahead and pull this out. Just to make it easier, what I actually did was I removed all of that, and now you're going to see why I keep this on there first. For this reason, because now I can slide the shrink fit all the way up to the shoulder on the fitting, and then I'll heat that up, shrink that down, and now it'll create a full sleeve seal, prevent any excess odors, which this hose really won't do anyway, and that'll be the final product. Now you might notice the hose end isn't on here. On the larger ones, we actually have to attach these, and as you can see, there is there's basically a groove that will install a pin. So how that will work is this will go on, your normal end will go on, we line up the groove, and then cut the pin at first, and now the pin will get installed, and now that's what keeps everything from coming out of place. So that's the final step. But this is only required for me to do on the larger hoses. The smaller ones, they're already set up for you. Now we are good to go. Ready to do the other end. Now, for comparison, we want to show what I'm about to replace. Now, these lines obviously are crimp as well, but they're a couple years old. And as you can see, they get very, very hard and rigid. So when you're servicing your race car, and you can also see this type of line is more prone to creating kinks and wear easier. You see, this thing is very, very hard. I mean, borderline crystalline. So you can see this is why it pretty much holds its shape. It becomes so rigid. So this is why you kind of got to replace your lines after a while. This is regular fuel hose, rubber reinforced, braided on the outside. Not going to stand up to a lot of heat. As you can see, that's why they have the fire sleeve on there. But all of these other crimp lines, they're very rigid. So when it comes to tearing down and putting your race car back together, they become very difficult, very annoying to work with, especially the larger hose. And you see the 12s aren't too bad, but when you come up to a 16 or a 20, there's only one thing to do at this point. Well, here's all of the new hoses with the BMRS fittings, easy swivel. The one thing that I do like is that they are double swivel style. On the more sharper bends, everything is a tighter radius, shorter fittings. They fit in a much tighter, more compact area. Uh, so if we compare these side by side, we'll actually be able to see that everything's slimmer, so you can use smaller heat sleeving diameter, keep your costs down. All of these, even though not necessary, like I said, I went ahead and I heat shrunk on the ends. So like you're more like a 90 doesn't necessarily have to be a double swivel, uh, because as long as we put one double swivel on it, especially like a 180, a 150, a 120, it makes it so much easier. And like I said, the actual center line on these are tighter than the others. So they actually protrude farther or not as far out as most other comparable brands. So when you have tight spaces, man, uh, these types of fit-ins make a huge difference. As you can see, even if we go up to a 16, look at how pliable that hose is, and it'll pretty much stay that way for the life of the hose. You know, that's something you don't really have to worry about. So when it comes time for you to be underneath the car trying to do these installs and route these lines, this makes a world of a difference. It is worth every penny when it comes to the higher end projects. I mean, it's just worth it. There's no real way to say. I mean, for a basic street car, it's not always necessary. But like I said, especially on the larger lines, if you have a quality build, a race car you got a ton of money in, you're going to get more flow out of the same size fit-ins, save weight. All of their fit-ins are going to be lighter. The hoses are thinner. The IDs are larger, so you get increased flow. And one of the things I tell you, a lot of guys nowadays are jumping on like what they're calling like full flow style fit-ins for like fuel lines and stuff like that, where it's a larger diameter on the in between the base and the actual screw end on the fit in. But the one thing guys don't realize is that's just the end. You're still going to be limited based on the smallest diameter throughout the assembly. So when you're still using a hose that carries a smaller ID, doesn't matter what you put on the end, you're still flowing through a smaller ID. It's like putting a restrictor on. Doesn't matter how much you have behind it, the restrictor is going to control what flows through it. So that's what happens. So that's part of the reason, like even on our regular lines, I mean, full flow style fit-ins, I mean, they look cool, but function wise, once you start doing the math, the gains are probably minimal because they're still using the older style hoses. And until you get into the higher end hoses, like the Brown and Miller, you're not going to get a larger ID bore to really aid the fact that you have a much larger diameter hose end. So that's where we're at right now. Now I'm going to go in and we're going to do some side by sides and we're going to get some weights now. So now we're going to compare these two. So like I showed you before, these two actually carry really close center lines, but you can see this unit is bulkier on the end versus this. So they slim that down. Now, when we measure the hose ID, it's about a 1 millimeter difference ID. So it does carry more volume. If we flip and we look at the end, the one thing you will notice is, I guess we'll put it sideways because this cut-in mat is actually, the grid is a 1-to-1 square. So you can see this is going to be a 1 inch to 1 inch comparison. So the number one thing, even at the angle, I guess I'll flip it the other way, is you're going to notice that the Fragola, for comparison, versus the BMRS, the length of the hose is actually shorter, or the hose end is actually shorter. Because you can see this one ends here, the BMRS ends up there. So when we do replacement hoses, your actual hose length is actually going to be a little bit shorter. The hose ends are also shorter, which is part of the weight savings. So typically, in most cases, just going from one brand to another, uh, the BMS or the BMRS hoses, when I cut it before I start assembly, usually I have to add about an inch to get everything to actually match back up to overall length. So now if we go and we're just looking at the ferrules, you'll notice that these ferrules or collars are going to be really nice aluminum. But the main thing is they are also shorter. If you take a look at this, these things, all right. So like I said, remove material, unnecessary material. Things are shorter overall. This all adds to the weight difference overall. Now, what we're gonna do is, if you check this out, what you can see is inside the hose, it's actually corrugated. It's not a straight hose. And what that does is it helps to aid on the Brown and Miller stuff so that you can do stuff like this. Now, you're not going to be able to do that with a different type of hose. And what happens is that also helps so that under heavy vacuum on dry sumps, you can't really suck the line down flat because even their black braided line, like this stuff, it is very similar with the corrugation, but this is only rated for like borderline 20 inches of vacuum. So you can do it on a dry sump. It has to be a low vacuum type system. Uh, Pressure wise, it's pretty freaking high. You're not going to run into any issues on pressure wise, but primarily uh, the dry sump style systems, This has a 20-inch cap as they test it, whereas the steel braided stuff has a 28-inch cap. So some guys might not like it, but that is why we have the optional sleeving. And even with the sleeving, still did the heat shrink underneath. Makes for a really killer combo. So like we said, so you can do a lot more tighter bends, even routing it in your car and not have to worry about kinking and deforming the hose and restricting flow or risk collapsing it on their heavy vacuum. Now, once we get into the ID, we're going to take a measurement on this. All right, there we go. Now, both of these are dash 12. The other one measured out at 0.87, roughly 0.875. And mind you, that's at the highest points on the corrugated ripples. So it's still actually probably higher if you count the grooves that we can't actually get down into with these mics. Now, this is the hose that I just replaced. These are measuring out at 0.775, 0.774. So basically 0.775. So we went from 0.775 to 0.87. So essentially we picked up another tenth of an inch, which it might not seem like a lot, but you add that throughout the system and flow, that is a huge increase just by changing to a different brand of hose. So we gained the benefit of a more functional hose, easier to install, longer life, uh, higher flow because it's a larger diameter. Like everything's there. So there's a lot of things. It's all about the things you don't see, because everybody's like, oh, I have steel braided, I have uh, black fiber reinforced braided, but it's like, okay, well, how good's the hose? How easily does it kink once you start routing it? And then you start thinking about things like, longevity. This is really, really hard as is, but that's part of the reason why this customer opted to send us his kit for us to replace all of those pieces. So, and it's the same thing. The ID of each fitting on the Brown and Miller, when you measure the ID, they're actually larger as well to support the larger hoses. So overall, you're going to get a significant increase in flow and everything else on your kit by upgrading. So all in all, you got to follow along as I redid all of these hoses today, and I explained to you why we redid them as far as the benefits. Now, if you're interested in getting anything like this similar done for your build, go ahead and shoot me over an email through the contact page on the website. And the site is autosportsengineering.com. And remember, these are all custom done. Depending on what combination you have, it could be anywhere from a week to 2 to 3 weeks. I'll be honest with you. Brown and Miller, sometimes we might get a back order on oddball fit in, but I do stock the most common sizes: straights, 90s, 45s, 120s, and a few 180s in all of the sizes. So typically I can usually turn most of these things out in about uh, week and a half, 2 weeks. So if you got a build that's coming up, you need dry sump lines, you need catch can lines, you just need the best quality fuel lines, just let me know and shoot me over your question. I'll shoot you back a quote and we can get your order processed. And thanks again for joining me at autosportsengineering.com. And be sure to follow, like, and subscribe if you like the information and everything else that's on the channel. Everything is down there on all the socials. So go ahead. Appreciate you supporting the channel.